What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So, I want to go ahead and at least do one more installment, at least for the time being, in my new updated top 10 best small forwards list. I did one a little over a year ago, and there really hasn't been much change except for one particular player I decided to bring down a notch over what I had him at last year, and you'll see it eventually. But everywhere, other than that, the list remains the same. At number 10, I had James Worthy. And at number 9, I have Dominique Wilkins. All right, Dominique Wilkins, of course, infamously was not included 25 or so years ago on the NBA's top 50 list. A lot of us thought that was an egregious slap in the face to Dominique Wilkins, although there are some other players that you can make an argument should have also been on that list and definitely top 75. I have no idea why Alex English and Adrian Dantley aren't on that list, but you have guys like, AD, and no disrespect to Dame, but Dame Lillard, who I don't know what he's done to be on that list. But anyway, Dominique Wilkins. Dominique Wilkins, for a very long time, was considered the greatest dunker of all time. And he's probably still considered a top 2 all-time dunker. But he was more than his athleticism. This is a guy that did work on his game a lot, especially after he suffered the most serious injury of his career, which was an Achilles rupture. And Dominique Wilkins was an inspiration to millions of athletes, because before Dominique Wilkins, an Achilles rupture meant for a while the end of your career, or at best the end of your prime. But Dominique Wilkins showed that you could successfully come back from that injury and still be a superstar caliber player. Of course, Kevin Durant has proven that to be correct as well. Dominique Wilkins was born in 1960 in Paris, France. His father was an airman, so he was born overseas. His family was overseas at the time, but they came back over to the States shortly thereafter. Of course, Dominique Wilkins has a younger brother who played in the NBA named Gerald Wilkins. And he also, I believe, had a nephew, I believe, that played in the NBA, Damian Wilkins, for several years. So there's definitely some strong family connections to the NBA when it comes to the Wilkins family. Dominique Wilkins was a mesmerizing athlete, and he was very dominant in high school. And he starred in the McDonald's All-American game back when he was a very young pup. And Dominique Wilkins earned the nickname the Human Highlight Reel back when he was in college, playing for the University of Georgia. During his tenure with the Bulldogs, he averaged 21.6 points per game. And he was named SEC Men's Basketball Player of the Year all the way back in 1981. He left college after his junior year to enter the draft early. In the 1982 NBA draft, Dominique Wilkins was selected third behind James Worthy and Terry Cummings by the Utah Jazz. However, he did not want to play for the Utah Jazz, ostensibly because he didn't want to play the power forward position. Okay? He would have played the power forward position alongside Adrian Dantley. I also believe that, I'm just going to go on a limb here, he probably also didn't want to play in Utah because it's Utah. Okay? Which would be like the Beeve living in fucking Harlem. It's just not a good fit, right? So ultimately, he was traded to the Atlanta Hawks. And this is where he played his best basketball for over a decade. For over a decade, Dominique Wilkins averaged 25 plus points per game for that franchise. During the decade, they had 4 consecutive 50-win teams in Atlanta. Wilkins became a superstar, I would say, starting around the 84-85 season, which was also, coincidentally, Michael Jordan's rookie year in the NBA. And it was the very next year, 85-86, that Dominique Wilkins led the league in scoring at 30.3 points per game. 30.3 points per game. It'll be the only scoring title, weirdly enough, that Dominique Wilkins would ever achieve because, Michael Jordan just got in the way. Now, Dominique Wilkins was known for his athleticism, and of course, there was always pressure upon him to enter slam dunk contests. I believe Dominique entered 4 slam dunk contests and won 2 of them. I believe he won in 1985, and I think he won in, let me get my dates correct. I think he won in 85 and I think 1990. But he lost in 86 and 88, I believe. I don't know if he entered in 87 or not. I can't recall. But I thought he entered 4. The human highlight reel thing was a combination of his athletic ability, dunking, power. He dunked differently. Like, his dunks were different. Where other players dunked and it was finesse and, there was some power behind it, Dominique generated, like, colossal power that belied his 205, 210-pound frame. The way that he power dunked, you'd have thought that he weighed 240, 250. He didn't just, when he dunked, it was anger, aggression. And the closest thing I can think of to a player other than him that dunked similarly would be prime Shawn Kemp. But he was phenomenal. He was box office, as Stephen A. Smith would say. And unfortunately for him, in Atlanta, they never quite had those teams that could compete with the best teams in the Eastern Conference. Whether you talk about the Boston Celtics, who, of course, we remember Dominique had an infamous duel with Larry Bird back in 1988 in the Eastern Conference Finals. I believe it's the farthest that Atlanta Hawk team ever got while he was there as far as postseason. Or the Detroit Pistons or the Chicago Bulls. They could never compete with these teams. His best point guard, I think his best teammate was probably Doc Rivers and Kevin Willis. So, it is what it is. As Dominique Wilkins began to get older and the team around him became less competitive, during the 1993-94 season, he was traded rather shockingly, all right, to the Clippers. Now, what kind of angered fans about this is that back in January of 1992, I believe the game was in Philadelphia, Dominique Wilkins had suffered an Achilles rupture. And back in those days, an Achilles rupture still is, actually, to this day, an injury that can end your career or alter your career severely. But back then, it was almost like a death sentence as far as your playing career. For Wilkins to be able to come back from that injury and play the 1992-93 season in nearly its entirety, and not just to play, but to dominate, to have a better season than he did the year before, was looked upon as a miracle. So for this guy to come back and then for you to ultimately trade him in that type of fashion angered a lot of Atlanta Hawks fans, right? He played the rest of that year with the Clippers. The next season he played with the Boston Celtics. He hated his head coach, who was Chris Ford, couldn't stand him. The next season he was out of the NBA, 95-96. I think he played in, let me look this up, I think it was Greece. Yeah. He played in Greece. I believe won a championship over there in Greece. 1996-97, that was the year that David Robinson was injured and wasn't available for the Spurs. It's before Tim Duncan arrived. Dominique Wilkins signed with the Spurs, and I think he averaged like 17 points a game coming off the bench for them. The next year, he was not in the NBA. He played overseas. And then in 1998-99, an abbreviated year, he played for Orlando Magic. But by this time, finally, Dominique Wilkins was a shell of himself. But his last year, he did get to play with his brother, Gerald Wilkins. And afterward, his career came to an abrupt end. But you look at his resume, Dominique Wilkins was a 9-time All-Star. He was on the All-NBA first team in '86. 4 times he was on the All-NBA second team, and twice the All-NBA third team. He was on the NBA All-Rookie first team. As I mentioned before, scoring champion 1986. 2-time NBA Slam Dunk Contest champion. He's on the 75th anniversary team. His number 21 is retired by Atlanta Hawks. He was a EuroLeague champion in 1996, the EuroLeague Final Four MVP, Greek All-Star Game MVP, Greek Cup winner, Greek Cup Finals top scorer, Greek Cup Finals MVP, and won the Italian Cup in 1998 and the Italian All-Star Game member in 1997. Just a phenomenal player. Number 9, to me, Dominique Wilkins. Tell me what you guys think.